"This place is not for losers," were the words my grandfather Harold said to me at the door of his Victorian mansion on what should have been the most special day of the year for him, his 85th birthday. I stood there holding a carefully wrapped gift, an antique pocket watch I had restored especially for him, wearing my best dress shirt, the one I saved for special occasions. I had just finished my shift at the workshop, my hands still smelling slightly of diesel oil, but I had dressed carefully to be present for the celebration. "But Grandpa, it's your birthday. I brought you your present and—" He interrupted me with a sharp wave of his hand, his gray-blue eyes staring at me with a coldness I had never seen before. The man who taught me how to change tires and fix engines when I was only 10 years old now looked at me as if I were an unwanted stranger. "Joshua, your cousin Marcus is bringing his fiancée to meet us today. She's a Harvard graduate, works at a law firm in Manhattan. Her family has tradition, prestige. You understand where I'm going with this, don't you? My name is Joshua Martinez, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would be kicked out of my own grandfather's house because of my job as a diesel mechanic. The same job he had encouraged me to pursue when I was a teenager, saying that real men work with their hands. I felt my chest tighten as I looked at the face of the man who had been my hero throughout my childhood. Harold Martinez built his real estate empire from scratch, starting out as a bricklayer. He was the one who picked me up from school when my parents were working, took me to his friend Roberto's workshop, and taught me that there was no dishonor in honest work. "Grandpa, I don't understand. You always said that." It was different before, he cut me off again, adjusting his silk tie. "Things have changed now. The family needs to keep up appearances. Marcus managed to graduate, got a respectable career, a classy girlfriend. And you," his eyes scanned me from head to toe with disapproval. "You're still getting yourself dirty with grease and oil like a rebellious teenager." The words hit me like punches in the stomach. For years, I had religiously attended every birthday, bringing handmade or carefully chosen gifts. I was the one who fixed his classic car for free. I was the one who spent weekends helping with home repairs. And now, in front of the whole family who was arriving for the party, he was dismissing me like an incompetent employee. "Maybe you'd better go home," he said, lowering his voice as he saw cars approaching the circular driveway. "When things calm down, we'll talk." I could have told him that I had just spent $300 on the antique clock I was holding. I could have reminded him that I was the one who paid for his roof to be repaired last year when the storm caused damage. I could have mentioned that I covered Grandma Elena's medical expenses before she passed away, without ever asking for a penny back. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I took a deep breath and replied, "I understand, Grandpa." I turned away and walked back to my Ford F-150 pickup truck, feeling the weight of the stares from my arriving relatives. Some waved timidly, others simply pretended not to see me. I put the gift on the passenger seat and started the engine, watching through the window as Marcus pulled up in his shiny black BMW and hugged his grandfather as if he were the prodigal grandson. As I drove home, a single question hammered in my mind. What would he say if he knew that the loser of the family had just reached $2,400,000 in investments? If you're wondering how this family humiliation story will unfold, keep reading, because what happened next completely changed the dynamics of our family forever. But first, I need to tell you how I got to this point, and why keeping my wealth a secret would become the most powerful weapon I could have ever imagined. My pickup truck was still warming up in the driveway when I received the first message in the family group chat. It was from my Aunt Patricia, my grandfather's sister. "Where are you, Joshua? The party is beautiful." I didn't reply. How could I explain that I'd been banned from the celebration for not being suitable? That the man who raised me when my parents died in a car accident had discarded me like a defective part of a machine? Harold Martinez wasn't just my grandfather. He was the patriarch of a family he'd molded in his image for 60 years. He started out as a Mexican immigrant, worked his way up from bricklayer to builder to one of the region's largest real estate developers. He married Elena, a piano teacher who brought refinement to his raw ambition. Together, they built a family empire based on a single unwritten rule: appearances were everything. Harold always had his favorites. Marcus, my cousin, was 2 years younger, but from an early age he showed what Grandpa called business instinct. While I was in the garage learning how to change oil, Marcus was in the living room studying financial spreadsheets. When I chose technical school, Marcus went to college to study business. "Joshua has skilled hands," Grandpa used to say with a tone that suggested it was a consolation, not a compliment. "But Marcus has business acumen." What hurt me wasn't just the obvious preference, but the way Harold rewrote our family history to fit the narrative he wanted to tell. For years, he had encouraged me to work on cars. He took me to Roberto's workshop on weekends, taught me about engines, told me that a man who can fix things will never go hungry. But that was before Marcus brought home his first rich girlfriend. Before the social gatherings began at the Victorian mansion Harold had restored. Before he discovered that social prestige could be more valuable than practical skills. The transformation was gradual. First, they stopped inviting me to the important dinners. Then my professional achievements were no longer mentioned in family conversations. When I opened my own diesel engine repair shop, a business that brought in over $500,000 a year, Grandpa just said, "That's nice, Joshua. I hope you can support yourself." Marcus, on the other hand, got an entry-level job at a consulting firm and was treated as if he had discovered the cure for cancer. I parked at home and entered through the side door, avoiding looking at the dining room table where Grandpa's gift was still wrapped. The pocket watch had belonged to his father, the great-grandfather I never knew. I spent 3 months searching antique shops until I found it, then another 2 months completely restoring the mechanism. Each gear had been cleaned and calibrated by hand. The gold case had been polished until it shone like new. I engraved a simple message on the back, "To Harold with eternal love, Joshua." Now it seemed like a cruel joke. My phone vibrated again. This time it was Marcus. "Dude, where are you? Helen is asking where her famous cousin is." Helen. The perfect fiancée. Harvard law graduate, daughter of a federal judge, granddaughter of a retired senator. The kind of woman Harold dreamed of having in his family, someone whose last name would open doors in social circles he still aspired to reach. I simply replied, "I couldn't make it work." The lie was easier than the truth. But Marcus didn't give up. He called me directly. "Joshua, what's the story? Grandpa said you had an emergency at work, but I thought you closed the shop today." Closed the shop? On the birthday of the man who raised me. Of course I closed. It's complicated, Marcus. "Young man, are you okay? You sound strange." For a moment, I considered telling him everything. Marcus and I grew up together. We shared a room for 3 years after my parents died. He taught me how to play chess. I taught him how to ride a bike. There was genuine love there, buried under years of family competition. "I'm fine," I lied. "Enjoy the party." "All right, but, Joshua?" Grandpa gave a really touching speech about family and legacy. He mentioned you too. He said he's proud of all his grandchildren, each following his own path. Proud. The word hit me like a punch in the stomach. "That's nice," I managed to say. I hung up before my voice betrayed the anger boiling inside me. Proud enough to talk about me when I wasn't there, but not proud enough to want me in the same room as his prestigious new addition to the family. That was when I made a decision. Harold Martinez had spent his life building his empire based on appearances and social status. He had chosen the perfect image of a family over the imperfect reality of unconditional love. But he didn't know one thing about the unworthy grandson he had so easily dismissed. For the past 10 years, while he was concerned with impressions and prestige, I had been building something much more solid than social reputation. And if Harold wanted to play the game of appearances, I was about to show him what it was really like to be judged by what you had, not what you represented. What happened next would reveal not only who truly deserved respect in this family, but also how many surprises were still hidden under the hood of this loser he had underestimated for so long. The birthday humiliation was just the beginning. The following Monday, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Aunt Patricia, my grandfather's younger sister, with whom I had always had a close relationship. "Joshua, dear, I need to tell you something," her voice sounded embarrassed. "About Saturday's party." I felt my stomach tighten. "What happened, Auntie?" "Harold told everyone that you didn't come because you were, well, jealous of Marcus' success. He said you were going through financial difficulties and felt inferior around Helen." The words hit me like punches to the chest. It wasn't enough that he had kicked me out. Now he was rewriting history to make me the resentful, failed cousin. He said that. "Joshua, you know how your grandfather is. When he wants to protect the family image, he improvises with the truth." Patricia sighed. But that wasn't all. Marcus was concerned and offered financial assistance. "In front of everyone. Harold accepted on your behalf, saying you were too proud to ask, but that it would be good for the family to take care of its own. My hand clenched the phone so tightly I heard the plastic crack. He took money for me? $500. Helen even commented on how nice it was to see a family sticking together, taking care of the less, well, you know, less fortunate, less capable, less worthy. Auntie, I have to go. Joshua, wait. I know it's not true what he said. You've always been hardworking and... I hung up before she could finish the pitying sentence. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, processing the information. Harold hadn't just cut me out, he turned me into a family charity project. A lesson in humility for Marcus to show his generosity. An example of how bad things happen when you don't choose the right path in life. At 9 in the morning, Marcus showed up at my workshop. Joshua, man, why didn't you tell me? He approached me with a look of genuine concern that made me feel even worse. You didn't have to be ashamed. That's what family is for. I stopped adjusting the wrench in my hand and stared at him. Tell you what, Marcus? About your financial difficulties, young man. Grandpa explained everything. He said you're going through a tough time, that business isn't going well. He took an envelope out of his coat pocket. Look, I know 500 isn't much, but it's a start. And Helen knows people in the logistics industry. Maybe we can get you some better contracts. I stared at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. Marcus, I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's family. And another thing, he lowered his voice, as if sharing a secret. Helen was impressed by the story. She said she admires our family's humility, how we don't leave anyone behind. It might even help our image with her family. Our image. My fabricated humiliation was being used as a calling card to Boston's social elite. Marcus, Grandpa lied to you. Kid, I know it's hard to accept help, but... He lied, I repeated, more firmly. I'm not struggling financially. I wasn't jealous of you. He told me not to come to the party because I wasn't good enough for Helen. Marcus laughed, as if I were joking. Joshua, that doesn't make sense. Why would he do that? Ask him. Marcus's expression slowly changed, the laughter turning to confusion, then to something like understanding. Are you serious? Completely. He put the envelope in his pocket, now clearly uncomfortable. Look, there must have been some misunderstanding. Grandpa sometimes expresses himself poorly, but he loves you. We all do. Marcus, answer me honestly. Sure. If I were a successful lawyer, graduated from Harvard, with an imported car and designer suits, do you think Grandpa would have asked me not to come to the party? The silence stretched between us like an abyss. Marcus looked at the floor, then at the tools on the workbench, finally back at me. Joshua, Answer me. Probably not, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. Then you know it wasn't a misunderstanding. Marcus stood there for a few more minutes, clearly struggling with a reality he didn't want to accept. Finally, he sighed. What are you going to do? It was a simple question, but one loaded with implications. Because for the first time in my life, Marcus was asking me what my next move would be, not offering me guidance or a solution. I don't know yet, I lied. Because in truth, at that very moment, as I watched my cousin struggle with the discovery that our family had turned me into a charity spectacle based on lies, I was making the most important decision of my life. Harold Martinez had built his empire based on appearances and social prestige. He had molded our family to impress strangers. He had sacrificed the truth in the name of convenience. And now he was using my supposed poverty as a marketing tool for Marcus's social ambitions. But Harold didn't know one fundamental thing about the failure of a grandson he had turned into a charity project. While he spent decades chasing status and social recognition, I had been building something much more solid and lasting than reputation. And if he wanted to make money the sole criterion of family worth, I was about to give him exactly what he asked for. Roberto, my mentor and the owner of the garage where I started working at 16, always told me, Joshua, the quietest engine is sometimes the most powerful. It was time to show Harold Martinez how much power I had quietly accumulated over all those years. But first, I needed allies. And there was one person who knew all the Martinez family's financial secrets better than anyone, Elena Santos, the accountant who had worked for Grandpa for over 20 years before retiring. What happened when I arranged to meet her for coffee the following week would not only change my strategy, but reveal family secrets that would make my revenge not only possible, but devastatingly necessary. The following Wednesday, I met Elena Santos at the corner cafe where she had eaten lunch every day for the 23 years she worked as my grandfather's chief accountant. Elena was a 62-year-old woman with gray hair, always pulled back into a flawless bun, who knew every penny that had passed through the Martinez businesses since the 1980s. If anyone knew where the family's financial skeletons were buried, it was her. "Joshua dear," she said, adjusting her reading glasses as she stirred her coffee. "I heard about what happened at the birthday party. Patricia told me." I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Elena, I need to know something. Has Mr. Martinez ever talked to you about the family finances? About who really supports whom?" She laughed, a dry, ironic sound. "Joshua, do you think I spent 23 years doing your grandfather's accounting without noticing certain inconsistencies?" My heart raced. What kind of inconsistencies? Elena looked around, making sure we were alone, before leaning forward. "Marcus never made more than $60,000 a year. Not even when he was working at the consulting firm in Boston. But Harold has been transferring $15,000 a month to his account for the past 2 years." I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. $15,000 a month? Every month. And what's more, the luxury apartment where Marcus lives. It's in Harold's name. The BMW? Financed by his grandfather's company. Even the expensive dinners he takes Helen to are paid for with a corporate card. Elena took a thin folder out of her purse. "After I found out what happened, I decided to do a little informal audit. Marcus owes his grandfather approximately $420,000 in undeclared loans, living allowances, and gifts disguised as business investments." My mind processed the information in slow motion. The cousin who had offered me $500 in charity had been living off his family for years. And Harold knows this. Of course he does. In fact, it was his idea. Marcus graduated, but he never managed to support himself. So Harold created this financial fiction. It makes Marcus look successful to impress Helen's family, but in reality, his cousin is a 30-year-old teenager living off an allowance. Elena opened the folder, revealing detailed spreadsheets. There's more. Harold's real estate development company is in serious trouble. 3 major projects have failed in the last year. He's financing Marcus's lifestyle by selling properties he should be renting out for income. I studied the numbers. Grandpa's income was dropping dramatically, but the expenses for Marcus continued to rise. "Donna Elena, why are you telling me this?" She sighed, putting the papers away. "Because Harold Martinez has forgotten where he came from. He forgot that you were the one who helped him expand the business when you suggested automating the rent collection system. He forgot that you were the one who repaired the company's fleet of vehicles without charging a penny for years. And he forgot that, of all his grandchildren, you were the only one who really built something with your own hands." She looked me straight in the eye. "But mainly because it's time someone showed Harold that there are consequences for treating family like pieces in a social chess game." I left that cafe with more than information. I left with ammunition. Over the next few days, I began to research meticulously. I discovered that the consulting firm where Marcus supposedly worked had closed 6 months ago. I discovered that the big contracts he always mentioned were actually sporadic freelance jobs that barely paid his credit card bills. I discovered that Helen truly believed she was dating a successful executive with a promising future. The entire prestigious empire Harold had built around Marcus was a house of cards financed by his own corporate ruin. But I needed more than information. I needed the right moment. The opportunity came the following Friday when Patricia called me in tears. "Joshua, Harold has arranged a dinner to introduce you and Marcus to Helen's parents. It's going to be at the most expensive restaurant in town. He said he wants to show how close and successful our family is." My blood boiled. "Did he invite me?" "Not exactly. He said he hopes you'll show up, but that you'd better behave yourself. Don't mention the financial difficulties. Let Marcus shine." The financial difficulties that didn't exist. Let Marcus shine with money he didn't earn. "Auntie, what time is dinner?" "Tomorrow at 8. Lou Bernardine." Lou Bernardine. $300 a person. A bill Harold would put on the bankrupt company's corporate card to maintain the illusion of prosperity. I hung up and immediately called Roberto, my mentor. Roberto, I need a favor. Remember that suit you wore to your daughter's wedding? Can I borrow it tomorrow night? Sure. But why? You hate formal wear. It's time to show some people that appearances can be deceiving. The next morning, I spent 3 hours preparing my presentation. I printed out detailed statements of my investments. I organized documents for my workshop showing annual revenue. I prepared a folder with information about my real estate holdings, the house I bought and renovated myself, the land I purchased to expand the workshop, the apartment I rent out for passive income. But most importantly, I printed out the information Elena had given me about Marcus and Harold's true finances. If they wanted to play the appearance game, I would show them how to play to win. At 7:45 p.m., I parked my pickup truck in front of Lou Bernardine. The valet looked suspiciously at the vehicle, but accepted the keys when he saw my impeccable suit and confident posture. I entered the restaurant and located the family table. Harold was in command, wearing his best suit, gesturing animatedly to an elegant middle-aged couple, clearly Helen's parents. Marcus and Helen were sitting side by side, she radiant in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Everyone saw me approaching. Harold stopped talking mid-sentence. "Joshua," he said, forcing a smile. "I'm glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, shaking Helen's father's hand. "Dr. Morrison, right? I've heard a lot about you." The conversation flowed superficially for the first 20 minutes. Harold controlled the dialogue, directing constant praise toward Marcus and his professional achievements. I listened patiently to stories about non-existent contracts and imaginary successes. It was when Dr. Morrison turned to me that the evening really began. "And you, Joshua? Harold told me you have a mechanic's shop. That must be a challenging job." The tone made it clear that challenging was a polite euphemism for inferior. I smiled calmly. "Actually, Dr. Morrison, it's quite rewarding. Especially when you build something that actually works." Marcus laughed nervously. Joshua's always been modest about his business. "Modesty is a virtue," I agreed. "So is honesty." Harold shot me a warning glance. That's when I decided the charade had gone on long enough. If you're following this story of family dynamics and wondering how far hypocrisy disguised as prestige can go, stick with me, because what happened next revealed truths that no expensive restaurant could spice up. I discreetly took out my phone and sent a message to Elena, "Now's the time." In 5 minutes, my phone would ring with a call that would change everything. A call that would lay all the cards on the table and force Harold to confront the difference between appearance and reality. But before that, I needed to set the stage for what was to come. "Dr. Morrison," I said, adjusting my tie, "you must be very proud of Helen. I hear she's one of the most promising lawyers at Harvard." "We are very proud," he replied, smiling genuinely at his daughter. "It must be comforting to know that Marcus has an equally solid career to offer her. Financial stability is so important in a marriage." Harold swallowed hard. Marcus visibly tensed. "Marcus has a lot of potential," Harold said quickly. "The consulting market is competitive, but he's building a solid foundation." "Building," I repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting word. It implies using one's own resources to create something lasting." My phone started ringing. It was Elena, right on time. I glanced at the screen and feigned surprise. "Excuse me, it's an important client. I have to take this." Harold relaxed visibly, thinking I was politely excusing myself. If he had known what was about to happen, he would have run out of the restaurant before I could say hello. "Hello, Elena," I answered, keeping my voice neutral as everyone at the table watched me. "Joshua, dear, are you ready? I just sent all the documents to the email address you gave me." "Perfect," I replied, pretending to be talking to a client. "What about the final budget?" $2,400,000, she said clearly, loud enough for Harold to hear. "Not including real estate, of course." I saw the blood drain from my grandfather's face. "Thanks, Elena. I'll confirm the details first thing tomorrow morning." I hung up and turned my attention back to the table. "Sorry for the interruption. Business never stops." Dr. Morrison laughed. I understand completely. What kind of business requires attention on a Saturday night? Investments, I replied simply. Sometimes the numbers change quickly and we need to adjust our strategy. Harold was visibly sweating now. Joshua, maybe we should. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone again, since we're talking about business, would you like to see something interesting? I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward Dr. Morrison and his wife. Their expressions changed instantly when they saw the balance. $2,417,342. My God, Mrs. Morrison murmured. Joshua, that's the result of 15 years of investing 80% of everything I earn, I said calmly. While my peers were spending on new cars and designer clothes, I was buying shares in trucking companies. I knew the industry inside out. Marcus was white as a sheet. Joshua, why didn't you ever? Never tell you. I smiled coldly. Because no one asked. You all just assumed that because I worked with my hands, I was financially incompetent. Dr. Morrison looked confused, shifting his gaze between me and Harold. But Harold told us that Joshua was having financial difficulties. That Marcus was helping. Helping with what? I asked, feigning surprise. Marcus, did you tell us you were helping me financially? My cousin opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Actually, I continued, opening the folder I had brought with me, I have some interesting documents here. Dr. Morrison, as a lawyer, you might find them fascinating. I spread Elena's spreadsheets across the table like playing cards. These are Marcus's bank statements for the last 2 years. Look at these monthly deposits of $15,000 from Harold's business account. Helen frowned. Marcus, you never mentioned passive income. It's not passive income, I explained gently. It's allowance. Marcus owes Harold approximately $420,000 in undeclared loans. Dr. Morrison adjusted his glasses, studying the documents. These numbers. Harold, that means. It means the company is going bankrupt, I finished. Harold sold 3 commercial properties in the last year to support Marcus' fictitious lifestyle. The silence at the table was deafening. Helen turned slowly to Marcus. You told me you made $90,000 a year at the consulting firm. Helen, it's complicated. The consulting firm closed 6 months ago, I interrupted gently. Marcus has been working as a sporadic freelancer since then. His actual earnings for the last year were approximately $18,000. Harold finally found his voice. Joshua, you have no right to tell the truth? My voice remained calm but cutting. Interesting. Last week, you had no problem spreading lies about my financial situation. Mrs. Morrison looked at her husband in horror. Charles, what is going on here? What's going on, I said, calmly folding the documents, is that Harold has turned his family into a theatrical performance to impress you. He kicked me out of the birthday party because my appearance didn't fit the fantasy he created. I looked directly at Harold. You said this place wasn't for losers. You were right. It isn't. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Helen, you deserve someone who's honest about who he really is. I took out my wallet and placed $300 on the table. That should cover my share of dinner. Harold, don't worry about paying. I know the business account is in the red. I started to walk away, but turned back one last time. Oh, and Marcus? About that $500 you offered as family help, I took a check out of my pocket and left it on the table. Here's $5,000. To help you get started again. Honestly this time. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Helen ask in a low voice, Marcus, is it true? Is all of this true? Marcus's response was a silence that was worth more than any confession. At the exit, the valet rushed to get my pickup truck. When he arrived, he whispered, Man, what happened in there? I saw some of the waiters peeking in. I've never seen such a quiet table. I smiled, giving him a $50 tip. Just some necessary family talk. Driving home, my phone started ringing insistently. Harold. Marcus. Even Patricia tried to call. I didn't answer any of the calls. The only message I responded to was from Roberto, How was dinner, Mijo? Educational, I typed back. For everyone involved. But as I drove through the brightly lit streets of the city, a single question echoed in my mind. Would Harold finally understand the difference between having value and appearing to have value? What happened in the days that followed would prove that some lessons are learned the hard way, and that the truth, once revealed, has the power to completely reshape the fabric of a family. The 3 months following the dinner at Le Bernardin were like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Harold called the next day, trying to minimize the damage. Joshua, can we talk like two grown men? Maybe I didn't express myself well. No, I replied simply. You expressed yourself perfectly. And so did I. Marcus tried a different approach a week later, showing up at the shop with dark circles under his eyes and humility I had never seen in him before. Joshua, Helen left me. She said she can't trust someone who builds an entire relationship based on lies. I kept working under the hood of the truck, not looking up. And Grandpa is furious with me, he continued. He says I ruined years of planning to impress her family. He cut off my allowance. Finally, I looked up and stared at him. Marcus, do you want to know the difference between us? He nodded desperately. When I was 22 and started investing my first $700, I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that real success is built in silence. You, on the other hand, have lived your entire life as a performance for an audience that didn't even respect you. Marcus lowered his head. What do I do now? You learn to live with who you really are, not who you pretend to be. 3 weeks later, Patricia called me in tears. Joshua, Harold had a minor stroke. He's in the hospital. I went to visit him. Not for forgiveness, but for closure. He was pale, hooked up to monitors, but his eyes still had that familiar stubbornness. Did you come to gloat over my misfortune? He asked in a weak voice. I came to tell you something you never understood, I replied, pulling up a chair. Harold, I always respected you. Not for the money you made or the properties you bought. I respected you because you started from nothing, worked with your hands, built something real. He looked at me confused. But at some point, you forgot where you came from. You forgot that honest work has dignity. You forgot that family should be based on love, not social performance. I took an envelope out of my pocket. These are the documents for your medical debt. It's paid off. His eyes filled with tears. Why? Because, despite everything, you're still my grandfather. And because I can. I got up to leave, but he called me back. Joshua. I'm sorry. I turned around one last time. Harold, you taught me that this place isn't for losers. You were right. It's not. It's for people who work hard, are honest with themselves, and build real things. Unfortunately, you forgot that. Dr. Morrison came to see me a month later. Helen had told her parents the whole story, and they were impressed not by the money, but by the integrity. Joshua, I've been in the investment business for 30 years, and I've rarely seen someone your age with such solid financial discipline. I have a few clients who could benefit from your insights. That's how I got into financial consulting. Not because I needed the money, but because I found that teaching others how to build real wealth gave me more satisfaction than accumulating numbers in an account. Roberto, my mentor, made the most insightful observation of all. Mijo, do you know what your greatest revenge was? What? You didn't change who you are. They tried to make you feel ashamed of your work, your appearance, your choice of life. And you proved that you can have $2.5 million and still prefer to get your hands dirty with motor oil. He was right. I still wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I still work at the garage 4 days a week. I still drive my Ford pickup with 230,000 miles on it. The difference is that now I do it by choice, not by necessity. Marcus got an honest job at a logistics company, making $42,000 a year. We shared a quiet lunch last month. We didn't talk about the past, but I could tell he was different. Less anxious. More real. Helen, I found out later, married a history teacher. Someone who makes a third of what Marcus pretended to make, but is genuine about who he is. Harold recovered from his stroke, but sold the Victorian mansion. He now lives in a smaller apartment more suited to his financial reality. He occasionally sends me simple text messages. How are you? I always reply, "Fine, thanks." The workshop has grown. I now have 12 employees and a 3-week waiting list for specialized services. Not because I became famous after the restaurant story spread around town, but because we've always been good at what we do. 6 months ago, a 19-year-old girl named Sophia showed up at the shop looking for a job. She reminded me of myself at that age, determined, hardworking, but financially unadvised. "Sophia," I said at the end of her first week, "do you want to learn something school never teaches?" Now she invests 15% of her salary in index funds. In 30 years, she'll be a millionaire. "But Mr. Joshua," she asked me last week, "when I get rich, should I tell everyone?" I smiled, remembering the question I never knew how to answer at 22. "Sophia, you tell the people who respect you regardless of what you have. And you keep it a secret from those who would only value you for your money. How do you know the difference? They reveal themselves. They always do." Last week, I received an unexpected wedding invitation. Patricia was getting married again at 58, to a retired professor she met in a gardening class. "Joshua," she said when I called to RSVP, "I want to thank you." "Why, Auntie?" "For showing me that real family isn't about impressing anyone. It's about showing up, even when it's hard." The wedding was simple. 15 people in a small garden. I wore the same suit Roberto had lent me for dinner at Le Bernardin, but this time for joy, not strategy. Harold was there, leaning on a cane, but smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Marcus showed up alone, wearing a modest suit he had clearly bought secondhand. During the ceremony, I looked around and realized something fundamental: this was real family. Imperfect people who chose to love each other despite their flaws, not because of appearances. After the ceremony, Harold approached me. "Joshua, can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Do you still consider me part of your family?" The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. For a moment, I mentally reviewed all the years of disrespect, all the cruel comparisons, all the humiliation. Then I remembered a man who taught me how to change oil when I was 10. Who took me to the garage on weekends. Who, before he lost himself in social ambition, had been a grandfather who loved me. "Harold," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder, "you've always been family. That was never the problem. The problem was that you forgot what family really means." His eyes filled with tears again. "Does that mean there's still hope for this old fool?" "There's always hope for those willing to change." Today, 2 years after that dinner that changed everything, I wake up every day knowing who I am. I'm not the failed grandson who needs to prove his worth. I'm not the millionaire who hides his wealth out of insecurity. I am Joshua Martinez. I work with my hands, invest with my head, and love with my heart. True wealth isn't in the $2.7 million I have in my bank account today. It's in the peace of mind that comes from knowing I built it honestly. It's in the satisfaction of teaching Sophia that money is a tool, not an identity. It's in the ability to forgive without forgetting the lessons learned. Harold tried to teach me that this place is not for losers. In the end, I found out he was absolutely right. But not for the reasons I thought. This place, this world, this life, this family, is not really for losers. It's for people who work honestly, love sincerely, and build real things. If this story of overcoming adversity and self-acceptance touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about how true strength comes from knowing your own worth, regardless of what others think. Because at the end of the day, the person you need to impress looks back at you in the mirror every day. And when she smiles back, you know you've won. Harold spent years trying to turn me into what he thought I should be. In the end, he just helped me discover exactly who I've always been, a man who measures success not by the size of his bank account, but by the strength of the foundation on which he builds his life. And that foundation? Well, it's unbreakable.